This is the part where I get to talk about myself. Anybody else find that awkward? Yeah, where you have to, talk about yourself and your journey. But I do get that question a lot as to how I came on my journey. So I'm going to do my best to share that with you and hopefully not bore you along the way. Where to start? So I think for me, my spiritual pursuits probably started at a young age. I think I can even recall back, I don't say think, I know, I remember when even I was 3 years old and I had some very deep, profound thoughts that I guess I wouldn't consider normal 3-year-olds to be thinking, but I do recall certain deep processes that I was entertaining at a very young age. And I've always, I guess, had this strong sense of self-awareness. And I don't know if that's necessarily most people's experience, but at least that is, I guess, my own level of being in my observer mind, always being aware of myself in all circumstances. And with that, I think comes a certain level of self-consciousness. And I mean that in the sense of like, maybe in that sense, starting off with more insecurity, because I had this perception of myself from early on that I just didn't quite belong and I didn't quite fit in. And that became more pronounced for me when I moved to the United States. And in fact, I'm originally from South Africa, Johannesburg to be specific, and didn't move to the States until I was 12 years old. One of the things too is that I feel like has opened my path for me is that the way I was raised is that I wasn't really raised under any certain umbrella of any like religious doctrine. In fact, my mother, which I feel like is probably one of the reasons I chose her as my mother, is because she made a break from the Catholic Church after I was born, because they refused to baptize me due to the fact that both her and my father had previously been married and therefore divorced. And she just could not conceptualize how this institution would not baptize a baby who was innocent, that had no, choice in the matter, and therefore I was being withheld from that. And so that just didn't make sense to her, and obviously didn't sit well with her. And that was, I guess, what made her break from that religious system, to the point where she raised us to be open-minded and be willing to explore. And that could have been religion or spirituality or whatever. So I kind of had an open doorway without being raised under any confines of any structured beliefs in that sense. And so I think I had an easier time maybe going on this path, or this path evolving for me, because I got to explore many things in my formative years due to my natural curiosity and wanting to explore all things, I guess, spiritual, metaphysical, channeling, all of it. I was very curious. But anyways, the other thing too to understand me is that I also moved a lot as growing up. I mean, I went to so many different schools and moved around a lot. And so in that sense of, I guess, being self-conscious and not feeling like I belonged came that questioning of, you know, who am I and why am I the way I am? And why don't I feel like I belong, you know? And I think I already had that sensation pronounced, as mentioned, when I moved to the United States, because, you know, I stood out like a sore thumb. I had this really thick accent and I spoke really fast. And there was definitely communication barriers in that. And so I had that sense of self-awareness that I didn't belong, but I felt like that was beyond just coming from another country or another culture or upbringing. And yes, there's many differences that that was attributed into that sensation. And so anyways, you know, schooling was a little tough to fit in, but every time I moved, you know, I also adopted this this version of me that became this actress, meaning I could recreate myself every time I switched schools, all for the sake of wanting belonging and acceptance. And so if I didn't quite fit in at the previous school, you know, it wouldn't be long before I'd find myself at another school due to moves and what have you. And so I would tweak some things and change some things, you know, until eventually, you know, I created this persona in me that I allowed to have the world perceive me as. In fact, I'll go into that later, but so anyways, I created this mask, and to the point where I even deceived myself in my own journey of what my truth is. But deep down, I've always been driven in private pursuits of exploration as to questioning that, you know, proverbial question of who am I, you know, and I think wherever there's a question, that would always lead to answers finding you, especially I believe that now. So with that, I was introduced at the age of 12 to astrology. So that was my first passion. And it started off recreationally and just trying to understand who am I? And, you know, at first glance, it was a very surfacey, superficial way of assessing myself, you know, when I was just looking at the zodiac signs. And really, as I began to dive deeper into that exploration and self-study, is when I realized astrology was really deeper than I could have fathomed. And in fact, it has been an amazing tool that I started at the age of 12 and has really served me well in not only understanding myself and the lens that I perceive my reality through, but it's also a way that has gifted me the ability to understand others by getting a glimpse of, say, their birth chart, which for those that have, you know, don't know much about astrology, your birth chart is kind of like your fingerprint in the cosmos as to the blueprint, to the personality lens that you essentially perceive your reality through. And there's many ingredients into that. So essentially all the planets, whatever the planets were doing, were in a specific layout in the cosmos and specific signs or zodiac signs or constellations, if you will, and houses that would therefore be a part of your birth chart based on the exact minute of your birth, which sets up essentially your rising sign or your ascendant sign. And what I learned was so profound because there was all these ingredients that make you you. And so you're not just this, you know, surface layer perception of a personality, such as, you know, my sun sign is Cancer. So I'm not just this Cancer that just is exactly like every other Cancer out there. And I found that really fascinating to be able to ascertain what makes us uniquely different from one another, even though maybe our sun sign might give us some things in common that we share in attributes of our personality, right? And so with my diving into astrology, I was able to get a glimpse of who people were. And also the more I delved as when I was able to also learn how to do predictive astrology. And that's essentially being able to understand the themes of these energies and interpret them and how they influence us, not only on a collective level, but also obviously on your individual level, because you have this unique chart, and whatever the planets are currently doing are energizing certain parts of you specifically and affecting you specifically, kind of like catalysts, and some more favorable than others. And that was very profound for me. And of course that became to be quite obsessive, because I realized I'm quite the controlling individual and wanted to control what the planets were doing or how it was affecting me. And, if Mercury was retrograde, hide in your house, or Saturn is testing you, whatever, So that being said, that's followed me. My journey has served me to this day, and I still use it as a tool to help now with others and my clients. But obviously, starting on my journey, it was for my own growth and my own self-exploration and discovery and realization, or healing and stuff like that. So that was 12 onwards. But another monumental thing that I was introduced to was when I was 13. And that was when I was introduced to a modality that my grandmother and my mother introduced me to, called the glass, which is essentially a tool to communicate with the spirit realm. And that really opened, I feel like, the doors of possibility for me, because the fact that we could communicate with, say, our deceased loved ones, and or learn about your guides and have these communications through this portal, if you will, of communicating to the other side of the veil, really helped me, I guess, have more of an open mind in many ways. But of course, society has its conditioning, and your schooling has its conditioning, and all of that. So certain things I've still on my path have had to uncover and unravel as to what is truth from illusion. But I would say, because I wasn't indoctrinated into any religious system, I had this open mind ready to explore, and had some pretty pivotal things early on that allowed me to maintain that open mind in my explorations for seeking and having questions to, the bigger questions, like, why are we here? Why did I come here? Why is there suffering? Why does life have to be hard? Why do I feel so different? Why don't I feel like I fit in or belong? And I think for a long time, like I said, I tried to mold myself. Think about it, come to the United States, and it's very media driven and very superficial in many ways. You see these airbrushed models, and so you think that you need to become that version to be, popular or well received, or, what have you. And I wasn't exactly the beautiful one growing up. I think I've grown into attractiveness, but I don't think that I ever felt attractive in those years. And, but again, I adopted this mask. And I also had in my schooling, I really resonated with artistic expressions, whether through actual art, drawing, painting, but also the expression through theater. And so I think that became a powerful tool for me, because I could become anything I wanted and be anybody I wanted. And by virtue of that, I adopted that into my way of life and recreating myself along my way for that acceptance. And it wasn't until, you know, I became so, I guess, taken over by that ego self without realizing it, that I had no clue who the truth of me really was, because I was moving so far away from that truth. But anyways, dabbled all my formative years, my teenage years, whether it was runes, tarot, magic, you know, I was willing to explore it all, channeling. Yeah, and then I would say, you know, I definitely experienced some very dark times within my own inner world, because I also became my own harshest critic. Definitely self-loathing and insecurities and not feeling good enough, and nitpicking all my flaws. I think my Venus in Virgo is responsible for that. It drives me crazy, my perfectionism. But that tendency in me got me to the point where it's like you beat yourself up so much. You're like the prisoner and the warden all at the same time, beating yourself up internally, you know, until I feel like at the point that I was doing that was in disguise of thinking that that's what others thought of me, right? So I was like beating myself up. I was abusing me in that sense, and doing it in the guise of this is what probably others think of me. Even though that wasn't true, that's what I led myself to believe about myself, and really just pummeled myself into my own, you know, sorrowful depths of shadow, you know. And I think that I got to the point where I was so numb. It's like kind of scar tissue, you know, when you just have a lot of scar tissue, there's no sensation there. I like reached that point within myself where I became numb to my own abuse, to the point where that then became my liberation. It was like I finally reached this precipice of not giving a fuck, you know, excuse my language, but I didn't give a fuck what anybody thought of me anymore. For the first time, you know, after beating myself up in the name of what I thought others thought of me, because I felt like I didn't fit in or belong or wasn't accepted, meanwhile at my own abuse, and to this point where I felt free from it, because it was like I couldn't even hurt myself anymore because I couldn't feel it anymore. And it was like I finally reached this place of this kind of byproduct of a confidence where it's just like, I don't give a fuck. Like, whatever, you know, nobody else can say or do to me anything worse than I've already done to myself. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And, you know, I think that level of confidence also attracted certain attentions my way, and had, therefore, a terrible experience that I think really then took me away from that level of confidence and shot me back into the depths of my sorrowful pits of myself. And in this time frame, you know, I was, I think, 18, 19, and to the point where I wanted to do everything to escape myself. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I didn't know who I was, and I wanted nothing but to escape myself. And so what do we resort to? You know, I resorted to the party lifestyle, all to numb my new torturous dialogue to myself, which was just cutting even deeper than the scar tissue that was there before. And it was like that experience triggered that in me and spiraled for several years. And to the point where I had to even question, well, why the fuck am I here? Like, I don't want to be here. You know, this planet sucks. It's painful. Like, why do I want to feel this way? It feels fucking terrible. You know, I'm constantly feeling down on myself. And so it was like this moment went off where I just had this realization that I couldn't continue that way anymore. And it was like I came into the power of forgiveness as my next step in liberation of self. And that was having to forgive the person that did something that allowed me to rob my light from myself, to allow myself to go back to those depths of darkness and shadow within myself, and forgive that person for what they did in that moment that followed me for several years, creating more self-torture. And I think the part of that was also because mostly I blamed myself. I thought it was my fault. And I later learned that it really wasn't my fault. But what was my fault was the abuse I continued to give myself along the way. And, you know, I may have experienced some shitty experience, but I'm the one that continued the abuse. So I had to confront that within myself and forgive me for being that warden, if you will, that that version of me that, you know, really tortured me, you know. And I felt like through that forgiveness, it was so liberating. It was like almost like all these weights fell from me, and I felt so much lighter and freer that I'd never experienced something like that. Not on that level, because even when I had that confidence was a derivative of numbness, of lack of feeling. And this byproduct of forgiveness was liberating. It felt light, because I realized forgiveness wasn't about justifying anybody's actions or behaviors if it caused any pain, hurt, or suffering, but rather it was the key to my freedom, a tool to free myself from myself and the attachments and associations that I identified with what that experience meant and what that meant about me. And so that, like, I felt like catapulted my energy, raised my vibration instantaneously by letting that one go. And of course went on a little bit of a forgiveness spree with other people in my life, just because how good it felt to release myself. And so I went on forgiving all these different people, kept feeling lighter and lighter. I still had the mask, you know, still was somewhat lost at this point, even though I was delving spiritually and trying to find answers. But it was when I was 19, I think late 19, was when I was introduced to The Secret. So the revelations about the law of attraction that was popularized for those of you that I'm sure know, and those of you that this might be still foreign to you. But I found that to be very life-changing for me, because what the law of attraction revealed to me is that we operate under certain laws of this universe that essentially can give you your power back if you take accountability for your relationship and the reality that you are creating, essentially. You know, the law of attraction says like attracts like. You therefore create your reality based on your vibration, your emotions, your beliefs. And, you know, as I've discovered, you know, there's some other angles to that too, such as patterns of karma and etc. But that wasn't necessarily where I was aware of at the time, but definitely the controlling nature in myself became the ability to self-master and control my thoughts and what I was creating, and therefore also challenge my own limiting beliefs that were not in alignment with my desires. You know, because we all have adopted beliefs along the way, many that do not serve us and actually sabotage us, but we've subscribed to them. And so if you realize that your reality is very much a byproduct of that, and of course, going back to understanding the relationship to astrology, how you perceive through that blueprint lens of your, say, personality, of your, you know, birth chart, is how you then interact with your experience, or how you respond or react to your reality, and therefore continue to co-create in your reality, right? So that was really life-changing for me, because it meant if I altered those things or shift those things in me, I therefore changed my reality. And so I was able to play with my beliefs and play with manipulating thoughts, and was able to create some very phenomenal things and opportunities. But of course, initially that was still driven from a space of ego, because I was still, you know, operating under certain conditioned beliefs that, you know, in order to get anywhere in life, you had to work hard, or which I did challenge that one, because my question was then like, well, why do I have to work hard? Why can't we just work easy? You know, that doesn't make any sense. You know, if you can work easy, why would we choose to create a reality that we have to work hard in, right? Who gave me that belief, right? Anyways, there's a lot of beliefs I challenged along the way that had served me. And even those egoic pursuits of thinking money bought happiness, which I learned pretty early on in life that it doesn't, because I attracted, you know, really good money in really easy ways to attract, to meet my needs, I guess. But what I learned firsthand was that money does not buy your happiness. But then if you sit with yourself, you have to ask, was I chasing happiness, or was I chasing money? So even though I attracted money, did not necessarily equate to happiness. So I was quite miserable, even though I had attracted manifesting money pretty easily. So that then was a big part of my unfolding into the next part of and stage of my journey. But before I get there, in between that, I had somebody gift me a course in remote viewing and remote influencing, and essentially that was a tool to essentially master your mind. And the remote influencing course was really great in helping you to access deep meditative states reserved for the yogi mind, but where you were able to access that through a guided process of mind entrainments to empower, you know, self-mastery of the mind in what you are essentially creating. So that further empowered my abilities to create. Another chapter in my unfolding is, at the time I was living in Las Vegas, but my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and she was still in South Africa. And I didn't know what to do to help her, and I ended up getting certified really quickly with Reiki, as I had some profound experiences in receiving Reiki, and thought maybe that's a way I can help my grandmother when I go back. And so the flight was booked about, I think, 2 to 3 weeks out from when I found out, to go back to South Africa. But unfortunately, my grandmother had passed away the day before before my flight. And so I never got to use the Reiki on her. Although, you know, I did use it on some friends and family, but again, it was just another tool that I put on the bookshelf, and only used it sparingly here and there. And anyways, while living in Las Vegas, and like I said, just in the space of feeling miserable, it didn't matter how much money I made, who I met or rubbed shoulders with. It just didn't mean anything to me, because it felt like everything around me was so superficial and so surfacey and empty, and that conversations lacked depth, and the mentality really was all about, you know, who you know, what do you do, what do you make, blah, blah, blah. And so I just, again, reached this like, I guess, fork in the road of like, there's got to be more to life than this. Like I'm so disconnected. I'm lacking connection. I didn't even know what the meaning of connection really was. And so I felt like I just was ready just to give it all up, because, well, if the money isn't buying my happiness, then what's the fucking point, right? And so I decided I wanted to move back to Colorado to and surrender. I was to the universe, like, hey, show me a sign, because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to create. I was really good at manifesting, but for the first time, I didn't even know what I wanted to manifest, because I didn't know what I wanted anymore. However, there were a few intentions that I put out that wasn't specifying what I was trying to manifest, but the intentions were very, I guess, in hindsight, very powerful. The first intention being that I wanted deep connection. I wanted to go deep with people, because I felt like I'm deep and I want people to go deep with me. I don't want to play on the surface anymore, because it became to the point where it was so painful for me to participate in that superficial reality, right? Which I later learned, because, you know, if you realize that all of our relationships as well in our reality is a mirror to you, if you're aware of that, they're all showing you different aspects of you. And for that, I would look up the 7 Essene mirrors to get a better understanding of that. But because our relationships all are a mirror to me, or you, us all, right? And what I was experiencing as the reflection was, again, that superficial reality that everybody was just so shallow, is when I had the epiphany that that was a reflection to the version of me that I had created, that mask that was all surface, that I allowed people to believe was my truth, which was far from my truth. But I didn't realize that, because I had adopted it so much so that I didn't even realize that that was a falsehood, that wasn't the real me. And, you know, I was pretending to be something I wasn't, showing attributes that I thought would receive validation or approval or acceptance. And by virtue of that, I was participating in being shallow. And so how can I expect anybody to go deep with me when I'm only showing them this version that wasn't even my truth? And so how could they go here and into me? How could I go into me or into others in connection, in deeper intimacy of that connection, if I was participating surfacey? So that realization did kind of come in, and I'll share some of that, of what I did with that. But that intention was, I wanted deep connection. The other intention was, I wanted to do what I love and love what I do, so I never felt like I worked a day in my life. I didn't know what that was going to be. And I'm sure I wanted my needs to still be met, yeah. But again, I didn't want money to be the driving motivation. I wanted to truly feel rewarded and love and be passionate about what I would be doing. And I didn't have a clue as to what that answer would be. But I had this level of surrendering, and we moved back to Colorado and did some soul searching and deep diving and reflecting in this space of non-manifestation, because I had no clue what I wanted. So I wasn't really creating anything, but I feel like those intentions planted seeds that unraveled that unfolding journey for me. And that's when my sister initially introduced me to quantum biofeedback, in which case I did become certified in it. It's a sophisticated technology that really served my still in place ego. In this case, my ego of the intellect, because I do pride myself in being quite intellectual as well. And so it came with a level of credentials, and still worked within my beliefs of wanting to do something to heal others. Especially, you know, I did tiptoe into going a little bit off the path to then realize that, you know, the traditional route of schooling was not the path for me. And so in that little snippet, so I think, you know, 6 months, and then I was introduced to the biofeedback. So moved back, had this period, thought I was going to choose a career out of the hat, started the balls rolling. And even though I'm, you know, I consider myself intelligent, and I can be good at anything, and I could be anything I really want, right? I definitely believe that. The point was I going to love what I do? Was I going to be happy with the choice if I was just pulling something out of the hat just so I could say I have a fucking career, right? But I learned really quickly, and going that route, I'm like, this still doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't sit well. I don't really justify being hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in debt for the sake of picking a career out of the hat. And I still don't even know if that's really what I want to do or be. So again, I pulled out and did some reflecting. And again, that's when actually the quantum biofeedback entered my awareness, and I was curious and fascinated. And long story short, I had some guidance that basically from a psychic that I connected with, medium, should I say. She was a medium. And so she basically revealed to me in that stage that it was okay to move forward with the biofeedback, because she said it would help me put myself out there, because it would come with that level of credentials, so I would feel confident in at least putting myself out there. She said, however, what people are actually going to see you for is your healing. Now, at the time, I didn't really take credence to that, because, you know, yeah, sure, I had certification in Reiki, but it was on the bookshelf. I wasn't using it. And all these other tools and attributes and things that I've, you know, found in my own path of self-mastery, again, was for myself. No, did not think this was going to have anything to do with what my path was going to be, right? Ironically. And so went forward, got the biofeedback, opened my business, and added in these sideline services. I added in the Reiki, the law of attraction coaching, the astrology readings, again, as thinking they were going to be sideline services, and that the quantum biofeedback was going to be my bread and butter. Lo and behold, you know, I started taking some Reiki clients and started getting more and more clients. And what started happening was I was receiving these like downloads, these what I now understand to be claircognizant downloads that come in these forms of knowings or transmissions, if you will. But because it was still relatively new to me, although I must say I've had plenty of incredible premonition-like experiences in my life, but again, it wasn't consistent enough to be like, this is my, you know, streaming of intuition. And so when these intuitions were coming through regarding the client, you know, I thought I was making it up because my ego was in the way of the interpretation of what was coming through. And, you know, I didn't want to be wrong. And so when these things were coming through, I wanted to have the proof up front before I was going to like want to relay it to the client, you know. And so I had to learn a lot about that in the process, because what I found out was that a lot of these downloads were actually the clue to their healing. As long as I didn't adulterate the message or, you know, present it through my filters or my egoic self-doubt and or withhold the message, right? And so it took a little bit of practice and time before I learned how to get more out of my own way, to trust what was coming through, to be the messenger, if you will, to the client so that they could receive what they needed to in order to heal. And as that started happening more and more and more, is when the messages started coming through that my guides, no longer wanted me to play messenger. And in fact, what they would rather me do is help my clients connect to that message or that guidance for themselves so that they then become the sole interpreter of what they therefore connect to. So I was then guided on how to guide my clients' consciousness to access higher dimensional realms where profound healing was possible, and how my journey has unfolded into helping clients explore those multidimensional realms or timelines or planets or galaxies, inner child healing, shadow work, helping people, learning how to help free people from, entities. And I would say it was very, with the quantum biofeedback and the what I was unfolding in the philosophy of this healing is realizing that truly, and I believe this fully, is that healing is accessed through the origins of the cause, meaning in order to heal something, you have to access the causation of what's causing the problem or the symptom or the pain or the suffering or whatever that may be, whether it's rooted in the physical origins, right? Or is it rooted in what's unresolved in the emotional body or on that soul level? The philosophy really is you have to access the original cause or the original wound to resolve and heal that before healing really is possible. Otherwise, what we tend to do as humans is to avoid pain at all costs. And we do that through different coping mechanisms, all to not feel what we're actually experiencing. So if you have physical pain, what do you want to do? You want to numb it. You want to take some, you have a headache, you want to take Tylenol, you want to do whatever you can to not feel that, instead of questioning, why do I have this headache? What's causing this headache, right? Or for example, if you're having heart problems and need to have heart surgery, instead of just isolating it to a physical malfunction, what is causing your heart to have those problems? Is it really truly just a physical condition, or is the physical condition a manifestation of what's unresolved energetically, symbolically, say emotionally? So that's been really profound in what people therefore connect to, as well as while in journey, they often would connect to higher conscious or sentient beings. And that could be made up of their own personal guides, angels, guardians, loved ones, ancestors, elders, star people, if you will, source, creator, God, So anything really is possible to connect to on that level. And it's been quite a blessing to be facilitating this and being a part of everybody's journey in that way, because it also, by me no longer playing messenger, it was like I kind of took a step back and then became the observer and the witness of what the client connects to, and or what they then became, many begun to be able to channel. In fact, channeling is something that I feel like all my clients can do to a certain extent, meaning that they can still connect to a higher level of consciousness in whatever form or formlessness that may be in presentation to them, but they are therefore able to connect with that and become the messenger themselves and being able to relay what they are therefore connecting to, or what guidance is coming through, what messages are coming through, or where their journey might be leading them, right? And so that was unfolding on that level. And at the same time, I was able to conveniently not be in the way egoically of the message, and therefore could just receive the message because it wasn't coming from me, and I didn't have to deal with the self-doubt, and in fact was seeing it happening over and over and over again with all of my clients, to the point where I can't refute being that witness to that, and the profound insights and perspectives that I feel like I'm kind of like a librarian collecting and connecting the dots and trying to weave, making sense of all of it together as they kind of overlap in a lot of what is learned. So I vicariously grow and evolve as a healer as with each person that I facilitate. And so anyways, as that unfolded and many profound and phenomenal, really phenomenal, truly exceptional experiences were taking place, and life-changing things I would witness, life-changing in the client's transformations that I could not possibly deny the validity of what they connected to. So I'm a believer in what I do and my role and how I facilitate. But then that became the question as to my guides, because they started telling me, well, you can't call what you're doing Reiki anymore because what you're doing isn't Reiki. Okay, so I was like, oh, well, what is it that I'm doing? And so they basically revealed that what I was facilitating was shamanic journeys. And I think that was kind of hard for me to swallow at first, because, you know, I was, you know, the term shaman was something I felt intimidated by, even, you know, feeling I was qualified for, even though I was seeing these profound things happening and I was receiving teachings via directly the spirit realm. And it wasn't because I went, I guess, a traditional route of apprenticing maybe, or being born into an indigenous community that it became your inheritance or birthright by virtue of that, or, you know, going to some credentialed institution or what have you. So so it took me a little bit to really step into owning what it was and who I was in that, in representing and titling myself of what I was facilitating. And so, you know, I am a shamanic healer, and what's been revealed as well has been pretty profound is to, you know, my path in this is almost not exclusive to this lifetime. And so that's kind of been unraveled in little tidbits, such as I've had multiple clients when they were in journey, and they describe when they look back at me facilitating, they said that they saw this old woman with long silver gray hair, rounded face, like this Eskimo woman, rounded face with beady eyes, with this glint of, what do they say? The glint of the knowledge of the universe in them, right? And I just found that to be so profound, and questioning, well, what are they seeing when they see me as this old woman? And then since I've also, in my own journey, I've worked with certain plant medicines and ayahuasca ceremonies and mushroom ceremonies, and you know, I do work with those medicines, and they've been very profound for me. And what's interesting is when I look in the mirror when I'm working with these plant medicines, I see myself like shape-shifting, like morphing into that old woman, where it like trips me out. I can't even like look at myself like in the eyes. I'm like, what is happening? I'm this old woman, and, you know, challenges my vanity, because I'm like, you know, like I got wrinkles and gray hair, and I'm like, oh, that's not a good look. So anyways, as mentioned, many of my clients have begun channeling. So even though all can connect and therefore become the messenger, but what's happening even more and more now is that as long as they are willing and open, because you can, even connecting to higher dimensional beings is within the free will of your consciousness on whether that's what you're available for. And so anyways, more and more of my clients who have been receptive to that have actually been able to channel like a conduit, as a vessel, that consciousness of whatever they're connecting to, and where that consciousness or sentient being will communicate through them. And then I am dialoguing directly with that, you know, sentient being. And so I've had actually several, or at least two of my clients who have channeled my higher guide, Black Crow. And I was introduced to Black Crow when I was 19 through a psychic who told me that he was my guide, but I didn't really have any verbal, any sort of dialogue to verify that until recently. I had some of my clients channeling where my guide spoke through her, and he's talking Native American and through this white woman, you know, like, and basically answering some of my questions. And so, you know, he confirmed that in my space, there's definitely, yes, a portal that has been opened up here, and we get many visitations of sentient beings, and it's very powerful. But he said I was also on sacred land, and there are many ancestors here. And so I was also inquiring into what is my connection to the natives, you know, because for one, he's a Native American chief, you know, and in fact, in one of my medicine ceremonies, I was like surrounded by these natives. And so I was like wondering, like, what is that? And why do people see me as this old Eskimo Native American woman? And what he revealed is that what they were witnessing is my lifetime as a medicine woman. In fact, he said that in that lifetime, you were Inuit, and that's what they're seeing. But he said, you've been a shaman in many lifetimes, in many forests with many medicines. And in this lifetime, you're here to create this amalgamation of those lifetimes in remembrance, so that you can merge those skills and medicines in how you serve. And so you're in this lifetime, you're trying to bring this convergence of that memory within you into practice as a shaman, a shamanic healer. And so that was interesting. And yeah, I get lots of insight all the time from that, and it's really, really cool. And my journey has been pretty amazing, and I'm very blessed to be able to facilitate in this manner for others, and again, witness life-changing transformations in them, in what they're able to access and heal or learn for themselves and be the sole interpreter of. But by virtue of them becoming the conduit, I'm evolving and growing too. So it's you know, it's, can't get anything better than that. And the reward for me is beyond monetary compensation. You know, sure, yes, I want my needs to be met and then some, but that's not my driving motivational factor. And the reward is deeper, and the connection is deeper, because I get to dive deeper into people. So I manifested that intention without knowing how it was gonna unfold, and who that meant I was going to be in that process, right? And so I did forget to, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, I'm sorry, but I did forget to mention to you, in that unfolding of stepping into this role as a shamanic healer and putting myself out there, is to revisit the part where I said I was still operating behind the mask. And so, you know, my services were evolving. I was in that transition from Reiki to this shamanic healing, and I was about to open up this space, meaning like I was about to sign the lease, should I say. And this moment hit me like a ton of bricks of like, am I ready to believe in myself, to feel that I could support myself and keep this space open? And if I were to fail, it would be because of me, right? And what I realized was, if I can't even believe in me, how can I expect anybody else to believe in what I was offering if I didn't? And so with that came the realization too that the mask that I had adopted along my way was not a representation of my truth. In fact, it was very far from it. It was a complete opposite of my truth and my spiritual inner beingness that I kept closeted and I kept hidden, except little things. Like I would share the astrology and stuff, but I kept pretty much all of this stuff in wraps, you know, before opening up this space, should I say. This space was a catalyst for me to essentially realize I had to take down the mask, which was very scary because it meant I had to be seen for my truth. And the same thing, like how could I expect others to be open enough to allow me in to dig deeper or dive deeper to help them if I was operating behind the mask, behind falsehoods? And so that's in that moment I realized I had to deconstruct that. And it also meant all these relationships that I had acquired along the way that had subscribed to this persona were also in for a rude awakening, because who they thought they knew, they didn't really know, because I didn't even know my truth at that time. So how could they know the truth to me if I wasn't even, that truth wasn't even the forefront of my beingness? It was the mask. It was who I was hiding from because I was afraid to be seen for my truth, you know? And I think part of me thought that I would be rejected for it. And I felt like maybe that was also my sensation my whole life, and the not belonging, but the spiritual part of me, I felt like was going to be not only rejected, but persecuted. And I was especially afraid of religious persecution. And I don't know if that might stem from a previous lifetime. I wouldn't doubt it. And I realized, okay, well, if that reflection would be showing up in my reality, it would be a mirror to me, and it's mirroring of that fear of that very rejection. And so if that rejection did show up, I had to realize I'm creating that because I was afraid of it. And I did have a few instances where I experienced that persecution when I was in that space. Like I remember, like I was putting out my flyers and it said Reiki on it at the time. And the lady was like, "Oh, what's Reiki?" And I started explaining it's energy healing. She's like, "Ah, stop right there. I'm Christian," you know, and like totally like shattered me on the inside. Like, oh my, like that rejection, like that wound just got like opened up. And again, realizing, you know, after I kind of mended myself and was like, okay, that was a reflection of my fear of that exactly. And so I realized I also had to take down the fear of that persecution. And again, I had to accept what it is and who I was, who I am, and who I am becoming, and what it is that I was doing and offering, and how that too was evolving. I had to have acceptance for that before I could expect anybody else to, and to, you know, be willing to receive it. And I set out another intention as well that has been very serving to me, which was, instead of trying to convince everybody that what it is I offer can serve them or could be life-changing for them. And even though I believe it is, I believe that it is, I believe that it's very powerful, and yes, life-changing, but it's much more resistance to have to convince others of this if they are operating behind beliefs that does not make them a resonant match to what I'm offering, because their beliefs may limit them in their ability to be open to such an experience, right? And so after realizing that too, I had to put these intentions out there that that those that are seeking and are ready are the ones that will be led here, or led to me in whatever capacity I am to be of service. And, or in reverse, I would also be connected to those that I'm meant to have certain healings with or evolution with in transformations of my own self in healing. And so yeah, I feel like I'm constantly growing, evolving, healing, and it's been quite a journey so far, and I'm kind of excited to see where it continues. On a side note, before I conclude this about me video, is I no longer offer quantum biofeedback. It was part of my journey, but recently sold that part of my business. Even though it's a phenomenal tool, I just wasn't using it enough. It gave me a foundation to put myself out there, and it's been very profound. And I think where I've been guided and where I'm being guided to is to facilitate in even more different ways, but again, more spiritually and on a soul level. And so I've been very passionate about the shamanic work, and I've been able to create this amalgamation in what I offer. And I do still believe in certain modalities that are powerful in healing through energy. So not just the spiritual, metaphysical, but I've also adopted certain tools through sound and frequency and technology, such as the photon sound beam machine and the Anya light, which is, creates this hypnagogic experience that helps you enter into these deep meditative states by stimulating your pineal gland and experiencing this like kaleidoscopic visual experience in your mind's eye. So it's really cool, and you're able to enter these deep meditative states. And also a PEMF mat, which is pulsed electromagnetic frequency mat. So even though I sold the quantum biofeedback because there was another investment that I wanted to make, and that one was I'll just have to show you, I'll have some pictures put up, but it's this huge Andara crystal pedestal. So basically traded this technology for this huge crystal, which is been channeled. That was a smart move, even though my ego was doubting that. I'm like, am I crazy? Like, am I really about to like spend this much on this crystal? But it said it connects the DNA and the codes within this crystal connects back to ancient Lemuria, and so what is being activated now through working with this pedestal that you can sit on is a whole nother activation of energy. So there's more to unfold with how I'm working with that in ceremony, and working even with medicinals and what have you. So I guess, yeah, if you resonate with this, please take a look around my website and explore the services that is being offered, and hopefully we'll get to work together soon in whatever way that's possible. Please feel free to inquire.